Hi everyone. Thanks for coming. I think I'm gonna get started. Just because we hit 5:50. Just want to thank Michael and everyone at Star and Baruch for helping organize this workshop. I know it's been difficult. I'm just glad that we can have these workshops and we can get this started. Felt like Mike had something to say.
Oh,
You turn on
sorry.
your camera.
I was just going to officially say thank you so much for all that you do for our students, Alan. Thank you for your presentations, your very informative, timely topics, and for volunteering your time and sharing your expertise and insight on these very important financial literacy related topics. So I just want to thank you for always doing this and for supporting our students in multiple ways. I'll just briefly introduce myself. Many of you probably already know me. My name is Michael Kalish. I work in the Star Career Development Center at Baruch. I'm one of the associate directors, and I manage the on-campus recruiting program and the internship program. I just want to say I hope you're all staying safe and healthy throughout these very challenging times. Hopefully you're all staying busy at home and keeping your social distance from everybody, but continuing to attend events and webinars and keeping yourselves busy and building your resume in as many creative ways as you possibly can. And just know that our center is here to support you. And as you probably all know at this point, 100% of our services has been moved to online, to virtual, but we are still meeting with students through Zoom appointments. We still have our workshops, info sessions, employers are still, doing different presentations. So I just wanted to let you all know that, that even though it is not business as usual, we're being as creative as we can to make sure that we are supporting you in every way that we can. So anyway, enjoy Alan's presentation today. I will be tuning in for the first half, Alan. It sounds like a very interesting topic. So I'll pass the torch over to you at this point.
Great, thank you. So welcome to the Financial Literacy Workshop. I usually host these workshops roughly on a monthly basis during the fall and spring semesters, sometimes the summer. I will be sharing these slides at the end of the workshop. It looks like we're recording it as well, so the recording will be shared along with it. I also run a blog on the side, tomoonfund.com. I'll give you a little look at it at the end of the workshop. But basically, I write about personal finance and retirement on this blog. Today, we're talking about credit score and credit cards, something that we all need at some point in our life in the United States. All right, so a quick introduction about myself, just add on to what Mike has already said. My name's Alan, and I am a CUNY Baruch graduate. So similar to many of you, I went to Baruch. I came from a low-income immigrant background, something that is important just because it means that I never had a lot of money. My parents never had a lot of money, and it was very difficult to talk about something that we didn't have, right? So we just never had conversations about money. So this includes, budgeting, retirement, all of that was not really talked about. So a lot of it was I had to learn by myself as I went along. I firmly believe that, we should all have an opportunity to retire, and I want to help all of you get there, right? These series of monthly workshops are meant to get us closer, to educate us about, a world where middle income class citizens can actually take responsibility for their monetary future, which can be difficult, especially in these tough times right now. The topic is even more important. So here's a disclaimer before I get started, right? I am not your personal finance advisor, right? This is very important because this is a presentation just as presented for opinion and for informational purposes, right? It's not meant to be financial advice. Everyone's financial life is very different. So you will need tailored advice, and I would strongly suggest you do your own research before opening up a credit card or taking any financial action. It's important to be financially educated yourself before you make any big decisions. Throughout this workshop, there's going to be a lot of terms, and I want you to interrupt me, right? It's very important that you interrupt me if you are confused. I'm always happy to answer questions because if you have a question, someone else has the same question. Right? If we're low on time, I'll let you know, but I doubt that's the case just because we're all at home. So I'm not rushing to get anywhere. I'm going to be here for most of the time. So you can ask questions in the Zoom group chat. I'm there and I'm monitoring the chat right now. So, and throughout the presentation, if you ask a question, I'll stop and I'll answer it and then move on. Right? It's important to ask as soon as you can. Otherwise, I will wait until the end of the presentation. All right, so credit scores are, it's a very unique topic in the sense that people don't hear about it until, you need to open up a credit card, right? Usually when people talk about credit score, what they're talking about is the FICO score. It's pretty much the same thing. It's a number, a 3-digit number that ranges from 300 to 850, right? The credit score is calculated with a secret formula created by FICO, which is the Fair Isaac Corporation, right? But the FICO formula is very popular, but it's also not shared widely, right? But we do have a good guess about how it's calculated. Another credit score is the Vantage score. You hear both of these terms interchangeably. They pretty much mean the same thing. And it's very important to think of the FICO score like a test score, right? The higher it is, the better, right? So the closer you can get to 850, better I would be. And that's because it determines your access to loans and the terms of those loans, right? The better your score is, the better your term loans will be. Usually a credit score of around 700 or more is, you have access to most loans that way. But you don't have to hit 850. You just need to get above 700 and you should be set for the most part. It's very important to mention that a credit score is something that people use across the board to give you housing, right? What that means is that if you want to buy a house, that's actually a loan, unless you can purchase an entire house all at once. So you need to have a mortgage, and that requires the bank to look at your credit score, right? If you don't have a credit score, they're going to not give you a loan. If you're renting, for anyone who's ever rented before, generally speaking, the landlord will ask for your credit score because they want to determine, can I trust this person to pay the rent on time, right? The credit score is a good way of determining that. Here are 3 major credit card reporting agencies that you may have heard of throughout the years. Basically, it's TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax. Right? These are the 3 companies that the bank or your landlord will basically call up and ask, hey, so-and-so, I want to learn more about, their credit history, right? What kind of loans do they have? Have they paid their loans on time? Right? And these companies would report on that information about you and basically detail that to the person requesting it. You still see the first slide. That's definitely not good because slides are moving on my side. Let's see. How about now? No one is seeing the slides moving. That's definitely not good. Let me stop sharing and try to share again.
Okay, if that doesn't work, Alan, let me know. I might have to take back host duties and you may have to send me your presentation, but it should work if you try sharing it again.
Got it, okay. How about, so you see the window now. Does the slide change now? Great, okay. Perfect. Good to know, okay. All right. So I'll just skim through these slides slowly again. Here's a disclaimer. Here it is for you to read. I gave a quick overview, but here it is in its entirety. The slide about chatting. I'm glad someone reached out. It would have been awkward if we waited until the very end to talk about slides not moving. So thank you for that. Credit score. Here's some information about the credit scores that we spoke about briefly before. And credit reporting agencies, I have their fancy logo right here. You'll recognize them right away. These are the 3 that you should trust. If you hear about any other credit reporting agency, they're not as large, and you should definitely do more research before trusting them. But these are the 3 companies that the government and landlords or any business transaction would use. All right, so we talked about the credit score. It's very important to talk about how it's calculated. Some of them are very obvious in the sense that, How do you determine if someone you can trust someone to lend money with? Do they pay it back on time? So we'll just go over some of them. Some of them are not as obvious, but it's very important to know about these just because it does impact if your credit score goes up or down over a period of time. First one is payment history, right? Do you pay your debts on time? Right? So this is the idea that if you pay your credit card on time every month, or your mortgage on time, right? It's any debt that you owe, it reflects well on your credit score. The amounts that you owe, right? This is how much money you basically owe to any entity. Right? The more money you owe, the less trustworthy you seem, right? If you owe a lot of money, the additional debt that you plan to take on means that you're less able to pay it off. Right? Not always true, but it does play a factor. The length of credit. This is the idea that the longer that you have credit, the better it looks. Just because if you've been paying on time for 40 years, you obviously seem more trustworthy than a college student that's only been paying on time for 1 year. Right? You have that time that people can trust. New credit. This one is something that I find strange and I disagree with, in the sense that why should it impact the credit score? But it does, right? So this is the idea that if you take out new loans, or even if you open up a new credit card, it does impact your credit score negatively, right? The idea that you open up a new credit card, it's like, hey, you haven't taken out any loans on that credit card, but since you open up a new line, we will lower your credit score temporarily. Usually it recovers in like a month or two, give or take. Types of credit, right? This is actually something that I have problems with. The idea that your credit score is impacted by the same as a hard inquiry. Yes, sort of, but it's the idea that it's related to a hard inquiry, right? So when you open up a new credit card or you have a new loan of any type, the entity that's making that loan to you has to do a hard inquiry most of the time to determine if you're credit worthy to open up this new loan. And for those of you who aren't aware about a hard inquiry is the idea that the bank or any entity will ask one of those three credit reporting agencies for a full detailed report of your credit history. And for some reason, when you do that, these agencies don't like it, so they lower your score. There's the other option, which is the soft inquiry that doesn't lower your score. So whenever you open up, or whenever a bank asks you if, are you okay with us pulling your credit score or your credit report, right? Be sure to ask them, is this going to be a hard inquiry or a soft inquiry, right? It does impact you, especially during sensitive times, like if you were trying to buy a house, right? You don't want your credit score to fluctuate up and down. So, be aware of that. Types of credit is the idea that, you should have a car loan, you should have a credit card, you should have a mortgage, right? These are the different types of credit. It does impact your score. I don't think it impacts your score a lot because personally, I've only ever had credit card debt or credit card loans, and they've never, my credit score is doing pretty well. It's above 700, so I'm not too concerned about that. But it is a factor in terms of why I haven't reached a higher score, I guess, is a good way to look at it. But I wouldn't say it's necessary. So here are the type of scores broken down, basically. A lot of agencies basically agree on this. If you look at any of the three that I mentioned, they will agree that this is roughly how they calculate your score. Payment history, obviously, is the biggest one. If you're paying your debt on time, it looks good, right? Amounts owed, how much money you owe. And stuff like types of credit, right? It's only worth 10% of your credit score. So, don't focus on that too much. Focus on paying on time and not borrowing too much money, which is a big one. All right, so, obviously those are a couple of factors, but there are, tips and tricks to improving your score, right? Ways to go about it. Big one, paying your bills on time. When I say bills, I don't mean just your credit score. I mean anything that can end up in collections, right? So your electric bill, your internet bill, right? Your phone bill, all of these, if you don't pay them for a certain period of time, that debt will be sold off to a collections agency. And when it gets to that point, they're going to report it to the credit agencies, which will lower your score. Right. So it's very important to pay all your bills on time, not just loans. Take on responsible debt. Right. One of the biggest problems that a lot of college students actually have is that they never had debt of any kind, right? Or they only had student loans. And this is one of the positive things about student loans. One of the few positive things about a student loan is that you have debt to pay off. So once you start paying it and on time, right, your credit score does improve. If you don't have any debt at all, right, if you never had a credit card or any debt for either a car or a mortgage, right, you basically have no credit record, right? So if you ever want to open up a credit card or you want to have a mortgage and you go to the bank, they're going to look you up and they're going to find nothing, right? That's just as bad as having a negative credit score in their eyes, right? Because they can't trust you, right? There's nothing for them to base that level of trust on. So they can't give you a loan, essentially. But there are ways around that, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Because obviously, everyone doesn't start off with credit cards, right? And the last point here is to avoid closing lines of credit. And this is very interesting. This is an interesting one because I made this mistake, right? I had a credit card that I opened up in college that actually I closed once I graduated college, right? Because I just wasn't aware. This is tied back to the idea of the length of credit. The idea that, you know, the longer you have lines of credit open, the more trustworthy you seem, just because this line of credit has been open for such a long time and you've paid this debt on time for that period of time, right? So if you plan to close lines of credit, there should be a good reason behind it. Otherwise, don't do it. Right? Just keep your credit card open because it will improve your credit score over time. Right, so everyone talks about a credit card, and I mentioned it here and there, and you've seen it. We have a question. When inquiry is done by any entity, can the entity see why the score is low? I ask this because can entity see the score is lower because of doing inquiry? Right, so what happens is, so there are two things going on, right? There's the credit score, and then there's the credit report, right? They're separate. Entities usually don't care about the credit score. They ask for the credit report, but they are tied to each other. Obviously, the higher credit score you have, the better your credit report looks, right? So they can see everything, right? They will see stuff like how many loans you have, right? This includes credit cards, cars, mortgages. How much do you owe on those loans, right? There's like near complete transparency to a certain degree of historical data, right? So they can conclude why your score is low. So it's very, it can be obvious to them. Obviously, if you haven't paid your mortgage for the past 6 months, you're not trustworthy, right? So credit card, it's basically a piece of plastic, right? Someone trusted you with a piece of plastic to borrow money to buy things. It's simple as that, right? You pay off debt at the end of every month. You may get a monthly bill, and then they tell you how much you owe, and you should pay it off or pay off as much as you can, but ideally pay all of it off at the end of every month. Right? A good rule of thumb is to buy only what you can afford. Right? Don't buy a nice flat screen TV if you can't afford to pay it off in a month. Right? Not ideal. This is very important. Just because if you don't pay it off within a month, you end up owing more money over the long term. And we'll talk about that both in the context of what that looks like and also in the context of our current situation with the coronavirus and how it impacts everything from a financial respect when it comes to credit cards. Okay, here's another question. If I don't use one of the credit cards, is it better to still keep it open? So there's a two-part question, right? The first part is if you don't use your credit card, some credit card companies will close them if you don't use it for a certain period of time, which still impacts your score negatively. I would say it is better to keep it open because it is a length of history, right? So keep it open. and put your phone bill on it. That's what I do, right? I have a credit card that I just keep at home, don't take it out, and I basically have my phone bill on it. And because the credit card company sees that I have recurring billing on it, they keep it open. Right? So, avoid having credit cards that don't do anything, right? Because eventually it will close. All right, so let's talk about the parts of a credit card, right? Whenever we open up a credit card, you'll get this long, detailed document, which is like the terms and services. When you sign up for Facebook or any of these companies that no one reads, but you should read this one because if you mess up, you're going to be in pain. So it's very important to read any document that you do sign, right? This is a big one. So basically, there are 4 terms. There's another question. How do I get approved for a credit card having no credit history at all? Great question. I will talk about it later, but a little sneak peek into that is that there's this idea of a secured card or secured credit card, which is where you take some money and you go to the bank and tell them, hey, can I open up a secured credit card? And you give them $200, and they'll basically give you a fake credit card that has $200 a credit limit on it. So you can basically use that, pay it off every month, and basically over 6 months to a year, the bank will see that you are trustworthy and will allow you to open up an actual credit card. And then, of course, they'll refund you the $200, right? The whole point of the $200 is that if you fail to pay, they will have something to basically pay off your debt, right? So that's one approach to improving your credit history if you don't have a credit card. There are other options that we'll talk more about. But look into a secured credit card with your bank. Right? Generally, if you ask about it, your bank will, move you toward that position or guide you to that the answer, right? So parts of a credit card, right? First part is that principal balance. Pretty straightforward. It's the idea. It's basically how much money you owe on your credit card. Right? If I owe $2,000, my principal balance is $2,000. And then we have the APR, right? This is the annual percentage rate. And this is basically the additional amount you would pay, on your principal balance if you do not pay off your debt every month, right? So, for credit cards, they're, crazy high. They're like 20+% roughly, give or take 5%. And this is just awful because that means every month you have to pay, like 15% more of that balance, divide by 12, right? Annual percentage rate, and so on. We'll talk more about that, but definitely this is why you should pay off your principal balance every month. Otherwise, you end up owing more money because interest is charged on top of that. The third thing here is minimum payment. In the case that you cannot pay off your debt every month in full, there is an option to just pay the minimum payment, which is going to be somewhere between like $25 to $35 or like 2% of your entire principal balance, right? And this basically prevents, if anything, if you can't pay it off, just pay the minimum payment because this prevents your debt from going to a collection agency. Right, the second it goes to a collection agency, it's gonna hurt your credit score, a lot more. Right? So it's very important to, if you can't afford to pay off everything, pay the minimum payment. The last point here is the credit limit. Right, so every company or every credit card company will come with a credit limit. Basically, this is how much money you're allowed to take out. Right, if my credit limit is $5,000. I can't borrow $5,001, right, or $10,000. All right, that's when your card gets declined. If you get your card gets declined, one of the reasons is that you borrow too much money, right? So you have to pay off everything before you can borrow more money. Generally, you shouldn't use all of your credit limit, right? If you have $5,000 in your credit limit, you shouldn't use all $5,000 of it because it makes you seem less trustworthy. You should use, people say somewhere between less than 30%. I personally follow less than 20%. Right? I don't want to use more than 20% of my credit limit. So what that translates to is my principal balance should not exceed 20% of my credit limit. All right, so let's talk about some math behind all of that, because if you end up in credit card debt, you have to at some point do this math, and it's very important to be aware of what this math looks like and why you should be paying, paying off your credit card balance in full every month. How does the bank calculate a person's credit limit? Good question. I would say it's like a secret formula, but for the most part, it's like the credit score, but you know what impacts it, right? A good example is the higher salary you have, the higher your credit limit will be. The higher your credit score is, the higher your credit limit will be, right? Basically, the bank looks at your financial life and says, hey, do they have a lot of money? Do they have a lot of money in the bank? And do they seem creditworthy, right? So if you hit all three of those, it looks good, right? And then your credit limit can go up. Other factors that can impact it is the longer you stay with the bank, right? The longer you're with the bank, you call them up and say, hey, I want to increase my credit limit. Chances are they'll say, sure, let's work on that. So it really depends on the bank, but generally there are some, stuff you can look at to increase your credit limit. All right, so let's say you have a credit card balance of $2,000 with an APR 18%. 18% is pretty normal, so something to be aware of. Just to give you some context, mortgage loans, their interest rates are around 4%. APR and APY, annual percentage rate and annual percentage. I don't remember what the Y stands for, but a good way to look at it is that they're pretty similar, but the difference to you is not something that I would say you should be concerned about. But every time you do a quick search on this, it's relatively similar. It's important to note that you shouldn't be doing any of this math by hand either, right? So try to use a calculator, online calculator for this. If you do have an APR instead, you have APY instead of APR. But the difference is it's pretty similar. It's an interest rate that is calculated on top of your credit card balance, right? It may differ a little bit in terms of how it's calculated, but the numbers are pretty similar. So if you paid the minimum payment of 2% or $25, whichever is higher, the question is, how long will it take for you to pay off the balance? Does someone in the chat have any guess about how long it would take for you to pay off a credit card balance of $2,000 if you only pay the minimum payment? So 2% or $25 every month. Four years. Okay. If someone gives another guess, I'll tell them if they're close, if they're warmer or colder. Seven years. You're getting warmer, but you're not there yet. 15 years. That is correct. 15 years. Not 10 years, it's 15 years. So yes, it's 15 years. So imagine you started out with $2,000 and you paid the minimum payment every month. It would take you 15 years to pay off everything, right? And in the end, you'll end up paying $3,327 of interest, right, due to the APR. And then in total, you'll have paid $5,327.70, right? 2,000 of that was the original, and 3,000 plus was just interest, right? So a lot of time, it's almost like you're paying a mortgage, right? But not really, because it's only $2,000. So hindsight 2020, you should have paid off the $2,000 as early as possible. Right, so this is a big reason not to pay just the minimum payment, right? Try to pay off everything. All right, so credit card debt, whenever you get a credit card, it's important to acknowledge you can fall into the trap of credit card debt, right? This is, it's important because our culture, the American culture, has a problem where we take on credit card debt consistently and we don't pay it off. Right? There was an interesting statistic that said, a lot of people shopping for Black Friday every year are still paying off debt from last Black Friday. Right? It's the idea of you basically you have a churning door of debt. Right? You pay off some debt, you get more in. It never ends. Right? Most Americans fall into this trap. Don't do that. Right? That's a terrible way to build credit because it doesn't build credit. It just hurts you in the long run. So good rules to follow: spend only what you have. Right? If you see a nice item that's very expensive, don't buy it if you don't have that same amount in your bank account. Right? Avoid long-term debt due to APR. Right? If you have a lot of debt, or you found a little bit of debt, pay it off as soon as you can. Right? Otherwise, APR will drag it out. Right? And this is how any credit card companies make money. Right? They want to keep you in debt because you pay interest. Be responsible. Treat your credit card like a debit card. Right? For those of you who do have bank accounts, you have debit cards, which essentially the second you swipe that debit card, the money does come out of your bank account right away. So treat it like that, and you'll never spend more than what you have. All right, so this one is it does happen a lot, credit card scams, but it depends on how we define scams. The way I see scams is that, there is something to entice you to join or open up a credit card, only to find out that you've been negatively impacted by doing so, right? And they're not upfront with everything, or they are upfront and they make it really hard for you to understand what you're doing to yourself financially. So there are two big ones. And I'll mention something about the coronavirus here as well, because it's important to talk about this now. So first one is the 0% APR, right? So a lot of credit card companies offer you a 0% APR for a year. Right? What this really means is that you can buy whatever you want as long as it's under the credit limit for an entire year. Right? Obviously, this is a bad idea because you don't pay off that debt. And once the year is over, the APR is going to be something that's obscenely high, like 25%, right? And obviously, once you've accumulated all this debt, you're not going to pay it off in one shot, right? So this is one of the tricks that the credit card companies use, 0% APR. Basically, hey, buy as much as you can, and then you're sticking around for the long-term debt. Not ideal, but obviously the way I see it is that all of us, unless you're already in credit card debt, you should never need to look at the APR, right? There are cases, and you can game the system, but generally speaking, you should never need to look at APR because you pay off your debt in full every month. Right? The second you start looking at your APR, you're in a losing game, right? That means you're trying to drag out debt, and you shouldn't do that because you end up paying more. Last point here. Another way to drag out debt is paying the minimum payment. Right? If you only pay the minimum payment, you end up paying a lot more over a longer period of time. So it's the idea of 15 years, and you basically paid more than what you borrowed, 2 times more. So not ideal. Obviously, does hurt you in the long term financially. In terms of how it impacts everything now, a lot of companies, since coronavirus has started, a lot of credit card companies are actually offering to waive fees, right, and interest during this period of time, because a lot of people have lost their jobs, right? And if you don't have a job, you can't pay your credit card debt, right? So even student loans, the interest, federal loans have been waived, so it's basically 0% right now. So it's very important, if you have a job and you have credit card debt right now, you should check with your credit card company if they offer anything like this for our unique situation. And if they do, take advantage of it. but this is the perfect time if you have a job to pay off your debt. So, it's something to be aware of and something that you can reach out to, right? These credit card companies are trying to help the best that they can in this current environment. All right, so let's talk about these headlines, right? Open up a credit card, everyone always thinks about credit card rewards, right? How can I travel for free with credit card rewards? How to get free flights with travel credit card and points. And it's very important to talk about because this is one of the upsides, along with having a good credit score when you open up a credit card. Right, it's the idea of credit card points. Right, this is basically credit card companies. Basically, every credit card company is the same. Right, you get a piece of plastic, and they tell you, here, you can now borrow money from us. Right, there's nothing essentially unique about that. So credit card companies have to come up with a way to differentiate, right, to compete. Credit cards are very competitive. There are few players in the game when you really look at it holistically, and it's because they're trying to outcompete each other. So they need to entice you to use their credit card, right? So they offer points to entice you. Because every time you swap your credit card, the bank or the credit card company makes some money, right? It's a percentage of your transaction that the merchant that you're transacting will have to pay the credit card companies. Right? So that's why you always hear these mom and pop shops or these other shops really want you to use cash, because if you use cash, they don't have to pay the credit card fees. So obviously they want you to swipe credit cards more as a credit card company. Right? So the rough equivalent of the points to dollars is for every dollar you spend, you get 1 point. And if you want to redeem those points, 100 points is equal to $1, right? So obviously the scale is not the greatest, but it is essentially free money. So at a certain point, once you have accumulated enough points and you've spent thousands of dollars, basically, you can redeem your points for cashback. Cashback is money that goes straight to your bank account, and you can redeem it for travel, which is what you always hear, or hotels, which is what you also hear about, how people travel first class for free, basically, with credit card points. Right? It's a very real thing. You can do it. You just need to spend enough money and be smart of your points. And gift cards, you can get gift cards too, and etc. Right? You can get a whole bunch of stuff. You should explore the point system for your credit card of choice before you decide to open up your credit card. All right, so there are certain credit card tips and actions that you should take after you've learned all this information about credit score and credit cards. So the first one is you should request your credit report once a year, right? This is to check for fraud and accuracy, right? And your credit report is you can request one from each of the 3 major companies that we spoke about before for free each year, right? But make sure that when you go request these credit reports, you do it on the actual government site, because you do have to enter your social security, you do have to enter your name, basically anything that can lead to identity theft. So don't do this on a public computer, do this at your private computer at home, and make sure you're using a government-based website. You should always make sure that you're on the right site for this. But you should check once a year because it's important to look for fraud and accuracy. Second is set your credit card on autopay. There's the idea that if you don't have to worry about paying a credit card, or you forget to pay it on time, you don't have to be. A lot of credit card companies offer autopay as an option, where you basically tell the credit card company to take money out of your bank account automatically. Right? You don't have to interact with that or do it manually. You should check your credit score with credit cards like Chase or Discover. A lot of student credit cards also have this. It's the idea that you can every month when you get your statement, they'll also send you credit score. It's not completely 100% accurate, but it is something to look at and to compare against. And you'll see it go up and down or up over a period of time, depending on what you're doing with your financial life. But it comes for free when you pick one of these cards. Not every card offers it. Some cards offer it. But yeah, as someone asked about before, if I don't have a credit card, or if I don't have a credit card and I never had a credit card, and I don't have a credit score, how do I get started? Start using a secured credit card. Just go into a bank of your choice that you would want to open up a credit card with and ask them about the secured credit card. It does help if you have a bank account with them already. Last point here is, get a budget. Right? If you want to figure out how much money you're spending in your credit card before you feel ready for it, you should have a budget to figure out how much you're spending. Otherwise, you can spend too much without knowing it. So that's basically my presentation. Questions. Does requesting your credit report lower your credit score? How far back in the report will companies look at to establish a person's credit history? I'll answer them in order. Okay, so the first one is, if you request your credit report, I believe it does impact your credit score, but it depends on how you do it. Right? I think the free one that you do every year shouldn't impact it too much. Right? How far back do they look? Well, it depends. Right? Whatever's on the credit report, they'll look at. But if you have a bankruptcy, or if you have a default, if you have a loan that you failed to pay on time, usually it does go away over the long enough length of history. I think it's like 7, 8 years, something like that. But it does vary from each individual action. So it's not something that I remember off the top of my head, but it does go away. So if you mess up now, it's fine. Maybe you can't buy a house for the next 10 years, but you can buy a house in your 11th year. That's how I like to see it. Right? Obviously, you should do the right thing throughout that 10 years to improve your credit score. But if it does impact you for a long period of time, so try not to get to that point. But there is a list somewhere. It's a quick Google search away. All you have to do is look at how long does XYZ stay on my credit report. But companies will look if it's on there. But everything eventually goes away for the most part. If I am an authorized user on another person's credit card, would it count towards my credit? Yes, it would count towards your credit. So for those of you who aren't aware, an authorized user is basically, someone else opened up a credit card and they said, hey, can I add XYZ on my credit card? And what that does is that person who initially opened up the credit card is still responsible for all of the debt associated with it. But you should, it will help them improve their score as long as they're on the card. But whoever's opening up the credit card for you, or whoever's authorizing you, you should trust them a lot, right? Because whatever debt that you accumulate, they're responsible for. Can you discuss paying your credit card in advance, benefits and drawbacks? This is a heavily debated topic with not a lot of research other than personal anecdotes. Personally, I pay my credit card. I don't pay my credit card in advance. I wait until the end of the month to pay it. But I know a lot of people who do pay in advance. Basically, what this means is that if you get you swipe your credit card, you pay it off the second you actually see the transaction on your card, or you pay it off a few days before the actual end of the month, right? There's this idea that the credit card company only sends your balance at the end of the month when they accumulate the statement. So if you have 0 on your credit card, it looks better. Or if you have $1, it looks better, right? I would say don't worry about that too much. Just focus on staying below the 30 or 20% credit limit. There are benefits and drawbacks to be discussed, right? Obviously, if you spend a lot of money, you pay below it, you don't hit $0, looks good. Or there's a magic number somewhere that is heavily discussed on the interwebs. But I don't see any concrete proof regarding that. As long as you pay your credit card on time and you keep it below 30 to 20%, seems fine to me. A lot of discussion about that. Don't think there's anything concrete there. Is a secured credit card okay to get during this time? What are other options we can consider if we don't have a credit history? So as I mentioned before, authorized user is another option. Secured credit card is a little bit difficult because usually you have to go in person and you submit a bunch of documents. And a lot of banks, are being more difficult, I would say, with loans, just because everyone seems like a risk right now. So other path is if you know someone that has a credit card, a family member, ask them to be an authorized user. But otherwise, I would say wait out this time until it gets better, and then go in person and ask for a secured credit card if that's not an option. But another thing you can look at is usually Discover. They're really lenient with their student credit card. I have a Discover student credit card. Obviously, I'm not sponsored by them or anything, but I found them to be really useful. And they're usually a lot of my friends have them as their first credit card with no credit history. Right? So take a look into Student Discover credit card. What's the best credit card company to start off with? Well, I think I gave you the answer. Discover is a good one. Any student credit card is a good one. Right? So just do a quick Google search, student or college student credit card. Discover is going to be up there. Other cards are going to be up there. But I can only speak about Discover because I personally use Discover. But obviously you should do your own research to figure out what works best for you. But student credit card is what I would look for. I once did not pay a minimum on one card that I opened because the amount was inaccurate, and the bank then fixed everything. They waived the interest, and I paid the principal balance. Will my report show the missed payment? Show a missed payment? Also, did the whole situation impact my credit score? So, credit reports do not get it right all the time. For example, on my credit report, my name is spelled wrong in some places. Not great, obviously. And credit reports can make mistakes. That's why it's important to check for fraud and accuracy every year, right? So they do make mistakes. If you find that there is a mistake, call them, send them some mail, snail mail. You can't email them, and they will fix it, right? So obviously this one situation where you did not pay a minimum payment on time, the bank was like, it's fine, it's okay. They forgave you and everything. You should follow up with a question saying like, did you, because for them to do this, they have to actually dock you, or they have to send information to the credit reporting agencies about this. You can ask them if they sent information, and if so, can they retract it, right? Try to go through your bank as much as possible. If all else fails, talk to the credit reporting agency that they interacted with. But there is a way to rectify and correct. There are ways to do it, and there are guides online for each individual credit reporting agency. Right? So generally speaking, did it impact your credit score? Maybe. Can you correct it? Yes. You just have to talk to them about it. Thoughts on secured versus prepaid Capital One credit card without any credit history? Prepaid and secured. I haven't heard much about the prepaid Capital One, but it functions similar to secured in the sense that you give them an amount of money and they give you a credit limit of that same amount. It should be fine. The hindsight 2020, any of these cards, you're going to be using them for 6 months or so, and then you'll get rid of them, right? This is not a card you want to keep around because it's not something that's meant to impact your credit score. It's something that's to help you open up your first credit card, right? So either one, as long as it functions similarly, I think it's fine, right? Whenever you have these discussions, for example, at Capital One, always talk to your banker and ask them, hey, is this card going to help me open up a credit card? If so, how long? It does vary from bank to bank. They all have different practices. You just want to get clarity on that before you dive into opening up one of these cards at a specific bank. It's a lot of questions, but I'm happy to answer more. Yes, there's another one. Will banks notify you if you have closed your credit card due to not using the credit card in a while? Will they provide you with better incentives and rewards as well if you haven't used your credit card in a specific time frame? Will they notify you? It depends. Did you set up any alerting with them? Or did you tell them, I don't want any mail from you? If you did any of those, they may or may not send it to you, depending on what your preferences are. But generally speaking, if you haven't touched the default options, at a minimum, they will send you some snail mail to tell you your credit card has closed. So, they do let you know. Some credit card companies warn you ahead of time, but I wouldn't bet on it. But they do try to tell you. But you always call them and ask if it's closed or not, as a last resort. Will they provide you with better incentives and rewards if you haven't used your credit card in a specific time frame? I haven't experienced that because it's very competitive, but it's also the fact that there are a lot of customers like you. So I wouldn't bet on them giving you better things. What I have gotten was a larger credit limit, right? So you can ask them, for example, you can say, hey, I want to switch to a different credit card company. It's like a cable company, right? If you threaten to leave, can they give you something more? Chances are it's usually a higher credit limit, right? There are terms or a lower APR, right? If that matters. So, a lot of those things are flexible. So they will try to help in any way that they can. But it's not anything like, free money or something like that, right? Most of the time. So something to be aware of. Multiple savings account affects your credit score. No, your savings account does not affect your credit score. That's completely unrelated. But it does impact you if you want to buy a house or a car, right? They can ask for bank statements. So it doesn't impact your credit score, but holistically speaking, it does interact with your credit score more often than not. All right, well, while people are thinking of more questions, I'm gonna take this time to go over this one slide here before I answer the next question. So you can always email me if you find that you think of a question later. Of course, I'm still gonna answer questions after I go over the slide, so feel free to do that. You can tweet me. I'm not super active, but I do have an account. You can also read articles on my site, my blogging site, tillmoonfund.com. There are no ads, so it's just running. Let's see if I can share this. Do you still see my screen right now? Or is that gone? Yes, okay, so this is my site. It's very dark, but you can see a bunch of articles. There's one recently about the coronavirus recession. I do not see the site. Let me stop sharing. Well, let me talk about one other thing before I stop sharing. So you still see my slides, right? You still see my slides? Okay, cool. So let me talk about this. I'll stop sharing and then reshare, show the site. So my next workshop is probably gonna be online. I can only imagine it being online right now on May 14th, 5:45 p.m. About helping your parents retire. If you come from an immigrant background, there's a very unique scenario. If you come from a low-income immigrant background, this is a very unique scenario where people don't have enough money to retire. So if you're curious to hear about that, I'll be talking about that then. Michael would be sending out information, so you can hear about that then. Let me stop sharing, show you the site, and go back to answering questions. So let's see, what can I do here? Screen. Here we go. Okay. Do you see my site? Now you see. Great. Okay, cool. So it's my site. If you go to moonfund.com, basically I have a bunch of blogs about various topics look at that, I need to fix this. But a bunch of topics about various financial, personal finance and retirement topics. If you want to subscribe, you can do so here. Basically put in your email, and I send out a newsletter whenever I have a new blog post. But yeah, let me answer some of these. Let me go back to answer some of these questions. All right. I'm just curious, why do banks give a certain credit limit where it's bad if we spend more than 20 to 30% of it? Why not just give the amount that one can spend entirely without facing impact on the score? Very good question. Well, TLDR is, I don't know, but if I were to give a reason for it, it would be, think of it like a test, right? The whole point of a credit report or a credit score is to determine if you're worthy of lending money to, right? If they give you, an inch and you take a mile, you're obviously not very creditworthy. If they give you an inch and you can only take, you only take an inch, obviously it's gonna be hard to tell if you're creditworthy, right? So they want to give you this, they want to give you room for error, right? Because if you make the error, you don't seem trustworthy. If you don't make the error, there you go. Now you're trustworthy. That's what likely how they approach it. But also, this is like a common, what they commonly do. They give you more than you need. It happens all the time, right? Whether you go for, whether you try to get a mortgage, or companies try to get a line of credit, it's always more than you need because you never know, right? Both from your standpoint, or if you need to borrow a lot of money, and from their standpoint, they want to see if you are capable of not spending everything. Cool. Are there any other questions? I'm gonna give it like 2 to 3 minutes. Yeah, I'm so happy that everyone came to this presentation. I hope everyone's safe. I hope everyone has enough toilet paper and enough food so you don't run out of any of those essentials. And you keep social distancing, right? It's definitely tough out there, especially from a financial standpoint. A lot of people are having a tough time. I'm glad all of you enjoyed it. And I hope all of you will now open credit cards. Maybe not at this very moment, but maybe after all this is over. But yeah, you all should have my email, so feel free to email me. I'm really usually quick to answer. Not that there's anything else to do right now other than provide information as best as I can. All right, well, thank you to everyone for coming, and stay safe out there. And maybe I'll see all of you in the next workshop.